Caradwin, 28 years old, stood in the middle of her small Seattle apartment, clutching a map leading to the Cascade Mountains, where she had sketched out her dream of a family-healing camping trip. She smiled, imagining laughter around the campfire, but then her phone rang. Her mother's choked voice came through. "Grandma's been in a car accident. She's in the ER. You have to stay." Caradwin's heart clenched, tears falling as she hastily folded the map, abandoning the tent she'd bought for everyone. But as she rushed to the door, a text from an unknown number flashed. "Don't trust them. Grandma's fine. Find her now." Who sent it? Why? A chill ran down her spine, and Caradwin froze, unaware that the call would unravel a horrifying secret, changing everything. Caradwin bolted out of her apartment, her car keys jangling in her trembling hands, her ragged breaths mingling with the patter of rain beginning to fall on Seattle streets. The mysterious text from an unknown number, "Don't trust them. Grandma's fine. Find her now," danced in her mind, a flickering spark amid the storm of emotions. She'd been set to race to the hospital, but now her feet felt pulled in a different direction, toward her grandmother's wooden house in the suburbs, where she'd once played beneath the pine trees as a child. If Mom lied, she whispered to herself, then why? The question stabbed at her heart like an icy needle, but she slammed her foot on the gas, determined to find answers. Her headlights sliced through the rain, illuminating the bumpy road, while in her mind, the image of her grandmother lying motionless in a hospital bed haunted her, tears streaming down her cheeks. As the car rolled through familiar streets, Caradwin's phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen, hoping it was her mother calling back to explain, to say it was all a misunderstanding. But no, it was a social media notification, a live video from Dulcie, her younger sister. Caradwin frowned, her finger hovering over the screen. Probably Dulcie showing off another song, she thought, recalling the times her sister posted violin performances that Caradwin always patiently watched and praised. But when she tapped it, what appeared wasn't the soothing sound of strings, it was a scene that froze the blood in her veins. Dulcie stood in a wide grassy clearing, a campfire flickering behind her, a marshmallow roasting stick in hand. Around her was the whole family, parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, all laughing, singing, as mountain winds rustled the familiar green tent. Caradwin held her breath, recognizing it as the tent she'd carefully chosen, packed, and planned to bring for the trip. Dulcie's caption hit like a knife, "Family is everything. Best camping trip ever." She slammed on the brakes, the car skidding slightly on the wet road, coming to a stop on the shoulder with a screech of tires. "No way," Caradwin muttered, her voice breaking. She replayed the video, zooming in on each face. Her mother, who'd just sobbed over the phone, was beaming, holding a glass of wine. Her father, who'd always sternly insisted the family stay united, was clapping Uncle Tom on the shoulder, belting out an old folk song. And Dulcie, the little sister Caradwin had once helped perfect every note, danced among them, her eyes sparkling with joy Caradwin wasn't allowed to share. She turned up the volume, their laughter drowning out the rain, a chorus of betrayal. Caradwin screamed, pounding the steering wheel until her hands stung, each blow an attempt to shatter this nightmare. "They tricked me," she yelled, tears spilling uncontrollably, mixing with the rain seeping through the cracked window. She'd given up her dream, cried for her grandmother's safety, while they, the people she loved most, were enjoying the trip she'd planned, using the very things she'd prepared. Fury erupted, and Caradwin dialed her mother, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped the phone. It rang once, twice, then cut off. She called again, but this time only a cold, busy tone answered. Her mother had blocked her. She tried her father, same result. Finally, she texted Dulcie, "How could you do this to me?" The message sent, but seconds later, a notification popped up, "You've been blocked by Dulcie." Caradwin slumped back in her seat, her breathing ragged, feeling like the world had just crumbled beneath her. They hadn't just deceived her, they'd severed her from them, as if she'd never existed in this family. She watched the video again, slowing each frame, and then a tiny detail stopped her heart, the sweater Dulcie wore, the one Caradwin had knitted for her last Christmas, every stitch soaked with her love. Now, it draped Dulcie like a trophy, while Caradwin sat here, alone, in the dark. But amid the agony, the mysterious text resurfaced in her mind like a beacon. Don't trust them. Grandma's fine. Find her now. Caradwyn gripped her phone, swiping to check the sender, but it was just a random string of numbers, no name, no trace. Someone knew the truth. Someone wanted her to know. She took a deep breath, wiping her tears with a soaked sleeve, and whispered, "If Grandma's fine, then it's all a lie." The thought was both terrifying and empowering, a small flame igniting in the cold rain. She started the car, her gaze steely, deciding not to head to the hospital but straight to her grandmother's house. If her family had chosen to erase her, she'd find out why, no matter how much it hurt. As the car moved, a memory flooded back. The last time she'd talked to Dulcie, her sister had asked about the camping trip with unusual excitement. "You picked such a great tent," Dulcie had said, eyes gleaming. Caradwyn had smiled, thinking it was affection. Now, she saw it was calculation. Dulcie hadn't just known the plan, she'd been part of it. She clenched the steering wheel, nails digging into her palms, leaving red marks. "They think I'm stupid," she muttered, her voice trembling with rage. "They think I'll stay quiet." But Caradwyn was no longer the obedient girl who sat silently when her parents skipped her birthday to take Dulcie on a trip. No longer the patient sister who fixed every mistake in her sister's music. She'd given them everything, love, sacrifice, even the sweat and tears in every stitch of that sweater, and they'd repaid her by wiping her out of their lives. The rain pounded harder, drumming on the windshield like a war beat, sinking with her racing heart. She didn't know what awaited her at her grandmother's, but one thing was certain, the truth was calling, and it wouldn't be gentle. As the last streetlights faded, leaving the dark road to the wooden house ahead, Caradwyn felt a new strength rising within her, the strength of the betrayed, ready to face whatever lay ahead. She whispered to the darkness, "If they want to play this game, let's see who wins." With that, she floored the gas, plunging into the night, unaware that what awaited would surpass her worst nightmares. The road to her grandmother's wooden house emerged in the hazy glow of the headlights, tall pines swaying in the biting wind, as if whispering something Caradwyn couldn't yet grasp. After the shock of Dulcie's video and the cryptic text, she'd sped through the rain, her heart pounding with a mix of hope and dread. When the car rolled to a stop in front of the weathered wooden fence, Caradwyn took a deep breath, the scent of wet earth and pine resin flooding her lungs, pulling her back to long ago summers when her grandmother taught her to bake cookies in the cozy little kitchen. But now, no warmth awaited her, only the truth, cold and sharp as a blade. She stepped out of the car, her mud-caked shoes squelching on the path, and pounded on the oak door, the sound echoing over the rain. "Grandma, it's me," she called, her voice hoarse, rainwater dripping from her hair onto her pale face. The door swung open, and there stood her grandmother, eyes bright beneath silver hair, holding a dish towel as if she'd just stepped out of an ordinary evening. No signs of an accident, no bandages, no frailty, just a flicker of surprise as she saw Caradwyn, drenched and red-eyed. "Caradwyn, what's wrong with you?" she asked, her voice warm but tinged with concern. Caradwyn didn't answer right away. She threw herself into her grandmother's arms, clinging as if she were the last lifeline in a raging sea. The faint scent of chamomile tea wafted from her grandmother's sweater, mingling with the old wood of the house, choking her with emotion. "You're okay, right?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Her grandmother stiffened briefly, then gently pulled her back, leading her inside and shutting the door against the growling rain. The small living room came into view, bathed in the soft golden glow of a table lamp, family photos hanging on the walls like silent fragments of memory. Caradwyn sank onto the sofa, still clutching her grandmother's sleeve, as if letting go would make her vanish. "Mom said you were in a car accident, in the ER," she said, her voice breaking as she recalled her mother's call. "But I saw them, the whole family, camping, laughing, like I don't even exist." Her grandmother went quiet for a moment, her eyes darkening, not with anger but with a deep, heavy sadness. She stood, walked to an old wooden cabinet in the corner, and pulled out an intricately carved wooden box, coated in the dust of years. "I feared this day would come," she said, her voice low like the wind through the forest. "Your mother called me last week, told me to pretend I'd been in an accident if you came by. I refused. I didn't think they'd still go through with it." Caradwyn's mind reeled, as if the floor beneath her were caving in. Pretend, she repeated, her voice cracking. They used you to trick me? Why? Her grandmother set the box on the table and opened it, revealing a thick stack of papers, faded photos, and a tiny tape recorder. Because they knew you'd stay, she said, her thin hands trembling as she flipped through the pages. You've always been the one to sacrifice, Caradwyn. Since you were little, when Dulcie wanted violin lessons, they found the money right away, but when you wanted art classes, they told you to figure it out yourself. I saw it all, and I kept everything. She pointed to the papers, receipts, letters, handwritten notes, each one evidence of decades of unfairness. Caradwyn leaned in, her shaking hands brushing a letter her mother had written to her grandmother. Caradwyn doesn't need much, she's strong, she'll manage. Dulcie's the fragile one. She broke down, not from sadness, but from a rage that flared up like a fire consuming her pain. But her grandmother wasn't done. She picked up the tape recorder, her frail finger pressing play, and her mother's voice came through, cold and cutting as ice. Mom, Caradwyn doesn't deserve the family's love. She's too independent, too stubborn. Dulcie's the one who needs us. Caradwyn fell back, her breath catching in her throat, as if someone had just squeezed her heart. She clutched her face, nails digging into her skin, trying to stifle the sobs breaking free. Grandma, she whispered, why would Mom say that? What did I do wrong? Her grandmother knelt before her, eyes glistening with tears, but her voice was steel. You didn't do anything wrong, Caradwyn. They did. They're afraid of you, of your strength, of the day you'd see them for who they really are. Her grandmother stood, pulling Caradwyn toward the fireplace, where the crackling flames cast warmth into the chilly room. I kept these things not to hurt you, she said, gesturing to the box, but to protect you when the time came. She pulled out an old photo, Caradwyn at 5, perched on her grandfather's shoulders, beaming beside a Christmas tree. Your grandfather always said you were a free wind, untamable. They know that, and they're scared. Caradwyn stared at the photo, tears falling onto the faded paper, blurring her younger self's smile. She remembered her grandfather's stories of endless forests, how he'd said she'd grow up as strong as they were. But now, she felt like a tree uprooted, alone in a storm. Her grandmother took her hand, the strength in that grip startling Caradwyn. They used me to hold you back, she said, her voice dropping, but I won't let them win. You need to know the truth, and you need to stand up. She pointed to the box, where one last paper lay quietly, a legal document, her grandmother's signature still fresh. I transferred ownership of the family store to you today. They don't know yet. Caradwyn looked up, stunned, a jolt running through her. The store? She asked, her voice faltering. But Dad's running it, her grandmother smiled, a sharp, blade-like grin. Not anymore. It's yours now. And I have more to show you, things that'll make them tremble. The rain outside still roared, but in the small room, Caradwyn felt a shift. Tears still fell, but now they weren't just pain, they were fire, a rising strength. She hugged her grandmother tightly again, whispering, I won't let them win. And as her grandmother nodded, her eyes blazing like the fire in the hearth, Caradwyn knew the battle had just begun, a battle she was no longer fighting alone. The fire in the hearth crackled, casting shadows across Caradwyn's face as she sat across from her grandmother, the warmth of the flames insufficient to dispel the cold gripping her heart. After her grandmother's revelations about her mother's deception, the ownership of the family store, and the promise of deeper secrets, Caradwyn felt as though she stood on the edge of an invisible abyss. She gripped her grandmother's hand tightly, their fingers interlaced as if letting go would plunge her into darkness. Outside, the rain still growled, pounding the windows as if trying to break in, but inside the small room, the air hung heavy with the silence between them. You said they'd tremble, Caradwyn whispered, her voice hoarse from dried tears. What did you mean? Her grandmother didn't answer immediately, her eyes swept the room, settling on the wooden table where the carved box still lay open, a gateway to a dark past. Her grandmother rose, walking slowly to an old bookshelf in the corner, where dusty volumes stood like silent sentinels. She pulled out a thick leather-bound journal, its yellowed pages tied shut with a frayed red silk ribbon. This isn't just about them cutting you out of the camping trip, she said, her voice low like distant thunder. It's about them stealing what's been yours for a long time. Caradwyn frowned, her heart racing as her grandmother placed the journal on the table, untying the ribbon to reveal pages filled with meticulous handwriting and carefully recorded numbers. Your grandfather left a trust fund, she continued, her thin finger pointing to a notarized page. $1.5 million, to be split evenly among the grandchildren when they turn 30. But your share, over $400,000, is gone. Caradwyn held her breath, eyes widening as she leaned over the document. The numbers danced before her, steady withdrawals, dates stretching back decades, starting when she was just a child. Gone, she repeated, her voice trembling. What do you mean? Her grandmother sighed, sitting beside her, her hands resting on the journal as if to keep it from flying away. Your mother and father took it, she said, her voice heavy. They used it to buy Dulcie an apartment in downtown Seattle, to pay for those overseas trips they called educational experiences for her. They even bought her a car when she graduated, the car you once dreamed of but gave up to pay off your student loans. Caradwyn felt the blood rush to her head, a searing heat spreading through her. She remembered the extra shifts at the design firm, the sleepless nights sketching drafts, all to pay off every borrowed dime, while Dulcie cruised by her house in a shiny car, smiling as if it were her birthright. But her grandmother wasn't finished. She turned to another page, revealing a photocopied contract, her father's scrawled signature at the bottom. This is the worst of it, she said, her voice trembling for the first time. 2 months ago, they planned to sell this house, my house, the one your grandfather and I built brick by brick, to fund their escape. Caradwyn fell back, her breath catching as if someone had grabbed her throat. Sell the house? She shouted, her voice breaking, tears spilling uncontrollably. This wooden house wasn't just a home, it was her childhood, the afternoons on the porch listening to her grandfather's stories, the smell of her grandmother's cookies every winter. She lunged forward, hugging her grandmother tightly, sobbing into her shoulder, feeling like the world was disintegrating. They can't do that, she whispered, her voice faltering. They're not allowed. Her grandmother stroked her hair, but her eyes flashed with a cold edge. I found out when I saw a contract with a forged version of my signature, she said. I stayed quiet, waiting, because I knew they'd expose themselves. Just then, Caradwyn's phone buzzed, the screen lighting up with an email from Uncle Corbin. She wiped her tears and opened it, revealing a short video. Corbin appeared, his face pale, hands shaking as he spoke. Caradwyn, I'm sorry. I was the trust fund manager, but they forced me to sign fake papers. I can't take it anymore. He paused, taking a deep breath, then continued, they've been taking your money since you were 3. And last week, I saw them planning to sell Grandma's house. I'm sending you all the proof, use it. The video ended, leaving Caradwyn in a deathly silence, broken only by the rain tapping the roof like a funeral drum. She opened the attachment, and line after line stabbed like knives, bank transfer receipts, forged contracts, emails between her parents discussing how to deal with the house. Caradwyn shot to her feet, pacing the room, hands clutching her head as if to keep her mind from exploding. They didn't just steal money, she screamed, her voice cracking with rage. They wanted to steal you, my memories. Her grandmother stood, stepping to her side, placing a hand on her shoulder with unexpected strength. They thought I was old and useless, she said, her voice sharp as a blade. But I kept everything, every transaction, every lie. And now you have it all to make them pay. Caradwyn looked at her, eyes red but blazing with a new fire. She turned back to the table, flipping through the journal quickly, stopping at a final page, a handwritten will from her grandfather, never made public. I leave Caradwyn not just money, it read, but the courage to protect what she loves. She trembled, her fingers tracing the faded ink, feeling as if her grandfather were here, whispering in her ear. He knew, she whispered, tears falling onto the page. He knew they'd do this. Her grandmother nodded, a sad smile on her lips. Your grandfather always believed in you. So do I. Now it's time to take back what's yours. The rain outside seemed to ease, but in Caradwen's heart, another storm was brewing, not one of pain, but of resolve. She clutched the journal to her chest, its weight like a promise. "They won't get away with it," she said, her voice steady as stone. Her grandmother took her hand, her eyes glinting like the fire in the hearth. "No, they won't," she replied. "And I'll be here with you, until the end." As Caradwen gazed out the window, watching the darkness soften into the faint light of dawn, she knew this new day wasn't just another day, it was the start of a fight she was ready for. The faint dawn light streamed through the wooden house's window, illuminating the leather-bound journal in Caradwen's hands, where her grandfather's words glowed like embers, igniting her resolve. After the horrifying revelations from her grandmother, the stolen trust fund, the plot to sell the house, and her grandmother's promise to fight alongside her, Caradwen was no longer the trembling girl in the rain. She stood, setting the journal on the table, feeling as if she'd shed an invisible burden. "I'll make them pay," she said, her voice solid as stone, and her grandmother nodded, her eyes gleaming with a determination Caradwen had never seen. But just as she was about to ask what came next, her phone buzzed violently, the screen lighting up with a call from Uncle Corbin. She frowned, pressed accept, and his panicked, broken voice burst through, "Caradwen, they're running. I just saw an email, they booked flights to Belize under fake names. The camping trip was a cover." She froze, her breath catching as if someone had gripped her throat. "Running?" she echoed, her voice faltering. Corbin gasped over the line. "Yes, they transferred the rest of the trust money into Dulcie's account, hundreds of thousands, through an offshore bank. I have proof, but you need to act now." Caradwen turned to her grandmother, eyes wide, and the older woman sprang up, grabbing her coat from near the door. "Show me," she said, her tone sharp as a command. Caradwen opened Corbin's email, and each line hit like a hammer: one-way plane tickets, copies of fake passports, and a message between her parents: "Once we're done at the store, we're gone. Caradwen won't react in time." She screamed, slamming her hand on the table, making the small lamp tremble. "The store! They're there!" Her grandmother grabbed her hand, squeezing tight. "Then we go. You're the owner now. They don't know that." Caradwen raced to the car, her grandmother beside her, the old woman's coat flapping in the wind as she floored the gas. The road from the suburbs into central Seattle unfolded in the dim light, towering buildings replacing pine forests, but in her mind, she saw only her parents and Dulcie, the ones who'd turned her love into a joke. As the car veered into the commercial district, her phone buzzed again, a text from Dulcie: "You think you're smart? I saw your post. But you're too slow, we're leaving." Caradwen gritted her teeth, recalling the post she'd thrown up on social media before leaving, a short status: "My family betrayed me, but the truth will win," with a photo of the plane tickets from Corbin's email. "Too slow?" she muttered, her voice trembling with fury. "Let's see about that." The family store, a small but well-known craft shop in Seattle, came into view, its lights still on despite the early hour. Caradwen parked, her heart pounding as she spotted her parents' silhouettes through the glass: her father, tall in a suit, stuffing papers into a black briefcase; her mother, hair tied back, barking into a phone, her sharp voice leaking out as the door cracked open. Dulcie stood nearby, clutching a travel bag, her face pale but her eyes defiant. Caradwen stepped out, the rain gone but the wind biting her skin, her grandmother following with the steady gait of a warrior. "Stop," Caradwen shouted, her voice echoing in the morning stillness. All three turned, stunned, and her father dropped the briefcase, growling, "What are you doing here?" Caradwen advanced, her muddy shoes leaving prints on the sidewalk. "Funny," she said, her voice ice-cold. "I was about to ask you the same thing. Planning to run off with my money?" Her mother smirked, stepping forward. "Don't be dramatic, Caradwen. We just need a break after years of struggling for you." But before Caradwen could reply, Dulcie lunged, eyes bloodshot, pulling a small knife from her bag. "You're the extra one!" Dulcie screamed, her voice breaking. "I'm their real kid, you're just a shadow." She swung the knife, and Caradwen stumbled back, her heart stopping for a split second. but her grandmother yelled, "Dulcie, stop," and Corbin, who'd just arrived from a nearby parked car, shoved Caradwin to the ground, the blade grazing his shoulder, leaving a red gash. Caradwin scrambled up, breath heaving, blood rushing to her face as she saw Corbin clutching his shoulder, blood seeping through his shirt. "You're insane," she yelled at Dulcie, but her sister just stood there, trembling, the knife clattering to the ground. Her parents rushed to pull Dulcie back, but Caradwin planted herself in front of the door, holding up her phone, the ownership papers glowing on the screen. "This isn't yours anymore," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "Grandma signed it over to me this morning. Your thieves stole my money, my home, my family." Her mother paled, her father roared, "You wouldn't dare." But police sirens wailed in the distance, blue and red lights flashing around the corner. Caradwin turned to her grandmother, who was supporting Corbin, and the older woman nodded, her eyes blazing. "I called them while you drove," she said. "The FBI's coming too. Corbin sent them the evidence." Dulcie burst into tears, collapsing to the ground, but Caradwin felt no pity. She just stared at her parents, once her everything, now shrinking as police cars screeched to a halt. "You thought I was slow?" she said, her voice cutting like a knife. "I'm faster than you think." Officers stormed in, cuffing her parents, while Dulcie was dragged aside, screaming for forgiveness. Caradwin stood there, the wind whipping her hair, feeling as if she'd crossed a threshold she couldn't return from. When the FBI arrived, an agent approached Caradwin, asking, "You're the owner?" She nodded, hands still trembling but eyes locked on her grandmother. "Yes. And I have all the proof." The agent nodded, signaling his team to search her father's briefcase, where a trove of fake documents spilled out. Caradwin gave Dulcie one last look, her sister now a stranger, sobbing by the police car. "You picked the wrong side," she whispered, not for Dulcie to hear, but to affirm it to herself. Her grandmother stepped up, resting a hand on her shoulder, and Corbin, despite his pain, managed a weak smile. "You did it," he said. Caradwin nodded, tears streaming down but not from sorrow, they were tears of triumph, of someone who'd reclaimed herself from the ashes. 3 months after that fateful day at the family store, Caradwin sat on a wooden bench in the small garden behind her grandmother's house, the late afternoon sun casting golden streaks across the lush green lawn. The chirping of birds in the branches mingled with the faint scent of lavender drifting on the breeze, bringing a peace she once thought she'd never reclaim. After the dramatic confrontation, when Dulcie swung a knife, her parents were handcuffed, and the FBI rifled through forged documents, Caradwin's life had turned a new page, no longer shackled by lies. She sipped chamomile tea from her grandmother's old porcelain cup, her hands no longer trembling as they once had, now steady, forged by the fire of truth. The FBI investigation had uncovered a web of deceit far beyond what Caradwin had imagined. Her parents hadn't just embezzled from her trust fund, they'd swindled the store's customers too, using the family's reputation to mask illegal loans. They now sat behind bars, facing a litany of charges from financial fraud to conspiracy to commit assault. The knife Dulcie wielded had become undeniable evidence. Dulcie, in a plea deal with prosecutors, spilled everything, from her knowledge of the escape plan to how her parents used her as a front to move money. In exchange, she avoided prosecution but was forced to leave Seattle, relocating to Oregon to start a self-sufficient life, stripped of the indulgence she'd once known. A week earlier, Caradwin received a letter from Dulcie, her scrawled handwriting stained with tears. "Sis, I'm sorry. I didn't realize how far I'd gone." But Caradwin silently burned the letter over a small fire in the garden, the ashes drifting skyward like memories she no longer wished to hold. The family store, now hers, had transformed into something entirely new. She didn't keep it as a typical craft shop but turned it into an open art space where young painters, people like she once was, struggling to pursue their passions, could display and sell their work. She hung her first painting on the wall, a pine forest in the rain, a girl standing amid the storm, her eyes blazing with resolve. "That's you," her grandmother said when she saw it, her voice warm as the sunlight. Caradwin smiled, nodding. "And you too. You gave me the strength to paint it." She also started a small fund from the store's profits, supporting young people who couldn't afford art education, a way to give back what had been stolen from her. Her grandmother emerged from the wooden house, holding a worn brown envelope, her eyes twinkling with something mysterious. "I have this for you," she said, sitting beside Caradwen. She opened the envelope, and a letter slipped out, her grandfather's slanted handwriting unmistakable. "Caradwen, you are my light. Don't let anyone extinguish it. I leave you not just money, but the faith that you'll do what's right." Caradwen stopped breathing, tears streaming down as she realized this was his final message, written before he passed, a beacon guiding her through the dark. "He knew I'd need it," she whispered, her voice choked. Her grandmother nodded, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Your grandfather always saw in you what your parents never did, a heart that won't bend." Caradwen looked up at the sky, where white clouds drifted lazily, and for the first time in years, she felt unburdened. She was no longer the girl who cried in the rain, who flinched before Dulcie's knife, or who doubted her worth. She turned pain into power, transforming the store, a symbol of betrayal, into a place of healing for herself and others. "You know," she said, turning to her grandmother, "I used to think family was everything. But now I see that real family are the ones who choose to stay by my side." Her grandmother smiled, her eyes shining like the fire from that night. "And you chose wisely, Caradwen. Your grandfather would be so proud." As the last of the day's light faded, Caradwen stood, holding the cooled teacup, and walked inside with her grandmother. She knew this journey hadn't been easy, but she found her own light, not from those who'd turned their backs, but from the ashes of what they'd left behind. And with each step, she felt her grandfather, her grandmother, and herself walking together on this new path. In the twilight of our years, we can look back and see that life isn't always fair, those closest to us can hurt us, as Caradwen was betrayed by her family. But her story teaches us that the truth, however painful, is the light that guides us. Don't let lies or abandonment dim your worth, find strength within yourself and in those who truly love you, like her grandmother. With age, we learn that family isn't just blood, it's trust and companionship. Live with resolve, protect what matters, and believe that even in darkness, you can find light, the light of your own soul.